Okay, we've got
I have a question.
three of you, there's three, I see it, there's three hands up, so you're the three. After you three, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. Okay, so we'll start over there with the mouthy one, because I told people they should be mouthy. Okay, and work our way across the
Happy
room.
to oblige. My question is, often when people hear that I'm Indian, I get the question, are you East Indian or Native Indian? And because I like to give people problems, I say, well, there's no West India, therefore there's no East India, therefore your question is nonsensical. But of course, the reason why they ask that question is because Christopher Columbus thought he landed in India, therefore we use the term Indians. So my question is, why do you use the term instead of First Nations or Aboriginal or something like that?
Because Cristobal the colonizer did not think he was in India. There was no place called India at the time. Grab a map, it's called Hindustan. Okay? In fact, there was no word that he used that was Indian. That's an anglicized. There's some discussion as to whether he was Portuguese or Spanish or Italian or even Majorcan. It doesn't really matter because the languages are close enough together that irrespective of which language he was speaking, it would come out as two words, Indios. Indios translates roughly next to God. He thought he found the Garden of Eden is what he thought he found. Okay, next to God, I got no problem with that. Why should I? I never really understood that, you know, European map business, East and West and all that, because they told me that Columbus had proven even to Europeans that it was actually a sphere. Okay, East and West make no sense except on a flat plane. So they're still going to sail off the edge of the map and crash into oblivion down below, or else that Johnny Depp movie was right last summer. You know, sail off the edge of the world. But they talk about the East, they talk about the West. You know, and Islam supposedly the East, but the last I saw at the time Columbus sailed, they just finally managed to push the Moors out of Spain, where they were maintaining the universities that informed Western Europe, except they were to the west of Western Europe. They're called the East, so go figure. Yeah? None of this makes much sense. At least not to me, but hey, you know, I'm dumb savage, I guess. Beat me up, Scotty, you're the next one.
What's your take on, I think I read about it, but I'm just curious to have you evaluate it again. The film The Black Robe, you did an evaluation of it. I'm just wondering what, if you could clarify that, your take on that movie.
Short answer or long answer? Short answer is it sucked. Okay? Really bad. I've got this whole thesis that the better cinema gets, the worse it is in its effects. Because it's still doing exactly what it was doing back when they first came up with talkies and even earlier. And in fact, you can go back to the very first docudrama ever made, which I think was in 1904, which was called The Indian Wars Refought, that proved that the Indians instigated the Wounded Knee Massacre by throwing their babies at the troops before they... I'm not kidding. I know I should be, but I'm not. I actually had these Lakota women throwing their babies at the troops who were so in danger that they had to open up with Hotchkiss guns. Yeah. Well, it's basically still doing this, but it gets more sophisticated. It's more refined in its delivery. And I mean, good God, these guys went to the museum. They made sure they had the right nail heads on the nails in the buildings and on and on and on. It's gorgeously... The cinematography is gorgeous, is what I'm trying to say. The ambiance, the atmosphere was very convincing. The acting was good, and many spirituality as a Chromeo, a dwarf, who was actually a real person. There really was such a person. But you get Chromeo, a dwarf, up against the austere, good-looking priest. You get an asexuality like dogs in the dirt, doggy style every time, versus the Frenchman teaches the Indian woman how to do it in civilized fashion. They call it the missionary position. I mean, should I go on? How many just blatant keys when you break them down? The delivery is so refined. Well, how sensitive. No. is non-missionary? Nothing at all? It's just it's a repetition of it as well. Okay? Well, you get the drift, I think. If not, I could continue. I don't think you want. Did you like the film?
It's more realistic than some of the other Hollywood movies.
Realistic in what sense?
I don't know, what do you think was?
Well, I was just telling you what I thought was wrong with it. The fact that they were able to deliver those tropes more effectively doesn't make it more realistic. It makes it better propaganda.
Was there some amount of violence in there that was not present in let's say, not Kevin Costner movies? I mean, there seems to be some look at violence in a pretty smooth way.
Well, my understanding, just for one example, and then we'll go on. My understanding, and I'm open to correction, because I'm not a Sixer, but Haudenosaunee throughout the entire Confederation, the clan mothers made determinations on dispositions of prisoners and things like that, which is utterly absent from that. So you got the strong male figure, brutal, vicious, runs people down the gauntlet and so forth. And I'm not saying the gauntlet never happened, but I'm going to say it didn't happen like that. Okay, I wasn't there at the time, but this is absolutely contrary to indigenous understandings, but it's very similar to the Jesuit relations. So now, if you want a real understanding of what happened in Nazi Judeo-side, you need to be reading the Nazis. That'll be the realistic interpretation.
But it was also critical of priests, very much so. Catholic.
Yeah. That's sophisticated. You could probably even be critical of Nazi Party as a Nazi. I can name a couple who were fairly critical. Adolf Eichmann for one. Okay? So if I really want to understand the nature of the Holocaust, I need to be relying on Eichmann. Same principle. Jesuit relations are going to explain any societies to me? I don't think so. No more than I'm going to let Eichmann explain Jews. And that doesn't mean that everything that is said in the Nazi literature by definition is false. We can go beyond the sheer propaganda into Nazi anthropology and so forth, and they'll give you factual circumstance, and it's in the interpretation, the meaning, the significance of those facts where the garble begins. Right? Yeah. That's why it's an academic enterprise and it gets acted out. And these guys did their homework. And so from a scholarly point of view, if you subscribe to Jesuit relations interpretation and you're conversant with that record and you fancy Parkman to be a great historian, then this is going to really resonate. So Parkman was a goddamn bald-faced liar. Straight up. He just made stuff up out of whole cloth. And I say that because his own paper reflects that he knew better than a lot of the stuff he was saying. He was saying for effect and to grind an axe. And that's the basis. I got a little debate that's coming out in the next issue of American Indian Culture and Research Journal. The guy who 15 years after I wrote that review decided it was imperative to challenge it. And every single citation in whole sections of it are Francis Parkman and the Jesuit relations. Well, I never denied that the film was made in consistency with those interpretations. The whole point is that it was. Yeah, which is what made it false, but very elegantly presented falsehood. Joe Garros would have been very, very proud. Yeah.
And just to follow up just briefly, the Haudenosaunee women wanted their men to go to war. They made them new moccasins. If they did not want them to go to war, they did not make the moccasins.
So there.